It's occurred to me recently that, I mean, I mostly cover news, right? When I put out a segment, it's news. And if I want to talk about a concept, it rarely gets a video titled itself. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the chances of Kamala Harris. I want to talk about this for a second, okay? Give me a second to cook, okay? I'm in the kitchen, all right? I'm adopting non-traditional gender roles for a moment to deliver an opinion of mine, all right? Obviously, like, at the fundamental level, it's kind of pointless to speculate on this because anything could change in the near future. Like tomorrow, some massive seismic political event could take place that completely rewrites our understanding of this election and the likelihood of anybody winning. So it's, you know, take everything with a grain of salt and know that anything can change at any moment. I was making fun of this for a while, mostly because I hate pollsters and polling is devilish. A lot of people keep asking me the same questions over like email and in chat, and it's really annoying. So people are like, hey, do you think Kamala Harris is going to win? What do you think your chances are of winning? The answer is, I don't know. Nobody knows. If recent history has taught us anything, it's that we don't really have a good model for understanding who is going to win the presidency, you know? When it comes to statistical analysis, predicting the future based on the information that we have now, almost as important as the information that you obtain, the polling, is the model you put the polling through. You know, it's not like A plus B equals C kind of deal. You know, you need a model to interpret the polling data that you're getting. And what's more, the polling data that you're getting also has its own biases. I've talked about this on stream before, but oftentimes when you see polls online, the methodology of the polling is just awful. You'll have polls that are online opt-in only, meaning that the only people who respond to them are people who saw the prompt and were like, sure, which pre-selects for psychopaths, because only psychopaths volunteer their time to fill out an internet poll, you know? This is one of the reasons why you tend to have this really extreme sort of curve out towards the edges in what would normally be a normal distribution whenever people are asked questions about expertise, political orientation, or anything else where people might find it funny to answer in the extremes, you know? What was that one thing? The polling, the people were asked, like, do you have training to operate a nuclear submarine? And like 12% of the population does. Obviously, people lie. I know this is crazy, but people do lie. And the models that people use to correct for lying don't always work. Like, you can try, don't get me wrong, but it's not magic. A lot of people are really concerned because right now, once again, pulling up 538, Kamala Harris is on average, it looking like, depending on the polls that you're looking at, somewhere in the ballpark of 4 to 5 points up in the general. Again, it really depends on whether or not you trust certain polls. Do you include Cornell West and Kennedy? You know, are you looking at outliers? Are you excluding outliers? Are you looking only for like really reliable sources of polling, or are you just throwing it all in there? There's a lot of variability, but it looks like overall Kamala Harris is ahead. The total national polling average is calculated by 538, has Harris up 3.6 points. If you aggregated all the polls and sort of average them together, you might find it's a little bit higher. I've seen these numbers vary depending on which site you look at. There's a Twitter account that like aggregates polling data that has the average a bit higher, like somewhere from 4 to 5 points up for Harris. Harris is ahead, but people are concerned because at this point in the previous two elections, Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden were more ahead than Kamala Harris is now. And of course, in 2016, Hillary Clinton lost the Electoral College, even though she won the popular vote. Joe Biden did win both the Electoral College and the popular vote, but not by as much as some polls suggested. So people are concerned that, you know, the polling is just naturally favorable to the Democrats, maybe because Republicans are embarrassed by their support of Trump or whatever else. And as a consequence of that, being 4 points up isn't really being 4 points up. Unfortunately, I have no way of sorting this out for you. I'm really sorry. Nobody does. If somebody knew how to sort all this out, then they'd be really cool, but nobody knows how to. Polling doesn't seem to be that reliable for the presidential because it's just too big a game, you know? You get more reliable and more consistent polling results, certainly relative to their outcomes, in local elections, as long as the polling that is conducted is thorough and of high quality, you know, and people rarely do that for local elections because there's less money involved. The stakes are lower. But I think that there's always going to be kind of a blurry, unknown variable to the presidential. I do think that things are better than people think they are, though. And the main reason for that is that Democrats have been consistently outperforming polls time and time again in special elections, in referendums associated with their policies, in the midterms in 2022. Since the revocation of Roe v. Wade, there has been a consistent overperformance from Democrats in like all across the board. Like the average is multiple points up ahead. Depending on the issue and the area, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, way outperforming the polls. Now, a lot of people think this is because of Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade being revoked was like a huge wake-up call to a lot of people. The very real possibility that a lot of women faced that their daughters would, as Kamala Harris puts it, grow up with fewer rights than they had, you know? So that's been energizing people. And it's possible that the energizing people are like that energy isn't really being reflected in the polling data. But normally, after a party wins the presidential, they do poorly in the subsequent midterms. The reason, most famously in recent history with Obama, where he did incredibly well in 2008, and then in 2010, not so much. And the reason for this is because you get the hype wave up to the presidency, and then the president has 2 years to disappoint you. And that's what leads to the backlash usually. Whereas in this case, right, in 2022 for the midterms, Democrats actually did really well. The red wave didn't happen. Is it possible right now that we have two conflicting polling biases? One of them is an apparent, consistent bias in favor of Democrats in the polling in the national election for the presidential. In other words, Democrats don't do as well as expected against Trump. But on the other hand, we have a post-Roe v. Wade bump in the other direction, where Democrats are outperforming expectations, considering that there's currently a Democrat president in office, and they've been doing really well in the meantime, you know? I really don't know. I do agree that turnout determines outcome. The Trump portion of the electorate, like the people who are voting Trump, they are locked in. They are psychos. I'm really sorry. I know, not every Republican's crazy, just a lot of them, you know, like it's not like not every Republican voter's a racist, but like the racists do vote Republican. It's that kind of deal. It's, you know, they're not sending their best. They're not sending the 73 million or so of their best. It's not great. What will really determine the outcome, I think, is the level of energy from the left and how much the Democrats are able to kick up. And that's why I've been talking lately more about energy than policy. The average American is dumb as a rock. They don't know what policy is. They wouldn't know one if it kicked them in the ass. They have no idea what policies are, how they work. They have no clue. I guarantee you that the average person probably thinks that laws are written by the president. I swear to God, if you ask the average American, I mean it, I'm not even exaggerating. I really do think that if you went out and asked like the average person, you would get like you could get some shocking, you know, yeah, right. So energy is what matters more than anything else in my humble opinion. And I think that Kamala Harris's campaign has very accurately determined that one of the big cruxes of this election is going to be their ability to win over women voters, right? Donald Trump has been faltering lately on the Roe v. Wade question because it's very electorally bad for Republicans that he revoked Roe v. Wade effectively by appointing 3 conservative Supreme Court justices. Donald Trump bragged about being responsible for Roe v. Wade being revoked. He can't not take credit for it. He can't deny it because the evangelical base that makes up the strongest constituency of the Republicans really likes that he did that, you know? Like, if Donald Trump started publicly backing away from that, there would be outrage from the evangelicals. It would be seen as a sign of weakness. They would hate that. And that is the strongest base within the Republicans. They have a lot of money and a lot of power. So he can't walk away from this very politically unpopular thing that he did. So what he's been doing lately is pretending that actually everyone really liked that he got rid of Roe v. Wade. That's been his line. He's repeated it like half a dozen times. Everyone, Democrats, Republicans, young, old, men, women, white, black, they all wanted Roe v. Wade revoked, so abortion was turned back to the states. That's what he's been saying. And nobody's buying it. You know, I don't think that's going to be effective at all. Nobody who was angry at him for facilitating the revocation of Roe v. Wade is going to be fooled by that, at least hopefully not. I don't think anyone believes that. I just think it's the first thing that pops into his mind. What the election results would look like if Gen Z voted at the same rate as the 65 plus demographic. It really is about energy more so than it is the, you know, the actual like swaying voters. It'd be over, you know? If you got this, that would be that. If enough young people voted, that would be Texas and Florida. Texas and Florida both have a lot of young people. Florida is known as kind of like a retirement hotspot, but at the same time, a lot of young people moved in for the, you know, booming tech and so on. A lot of people have moved into Florida lately. So, and Texas, likewise with the tech industry. So, you know, there's an even crazier map in that thread. You mean this one? The election if only voters 18 to 29 casted a ballot? Ah, you mean the good timeline. We don't quite get Wyoming, Idaho, West Virginia, and what have you, but you know, yeah, Kowalski, you bring up a good point. The sway of independence is way more powerful than a lot of people give it credit for, not because a ton of independents necessarily turn out, but because the interest of independence is usually a good barometer for interest overall. You know what I mean? If the independents sway disproportionately one way or another, and right now they're swaying towards Kamala Harris. If they sway one way or the other, it's usually an indication that you've been able to like sweep up more interest than you would expect because you're catching that many people who care so little that they are independents. You know? Vosh, how do we convince people that Trump's economics and inflation would be worse? Wrong, dumbass. What did I say about policy? You think the average American knows what inflation is? What economics is? Ridiculous. What we need to be concerned about most is energy. And unfortunately, in this regard, this is more the purview of like the resist libs or the incredibly obnoxious like 19-year-old white gay boys who are like, you know, K-Hive material. You know what I mean? They're like, vote for Kamala Harris or I'll dox you, that kind of thing. Those people, that energy is mostly going to be like irritating lib shit territory because that's their purview. I mean, from the left, the real left, I mean, there's only so much energy you can muster. I'm interested in this from an analysis perspective. I think there are things that you can do as a leftist to push people in the right direction. Obviously, Kamala Harris is better than Trump, you know? But that energy is often like kind of dumb, you know? Like dumb enthusiasm. It's politics, you know? It's not, we're not solving math equations on a chalkboard at you know, MIT. We're energizing people to go vote. If everyone went out there and voted, like, it'd be over for us. No, wait, sorry. It'd be over in our favor. It'd be over for them. We would win is what I'm saying, you know. We benefit from higher turnout. Joe Biden got, what, 7 million more votes than Donald Trump in the last election? And that was the highest turnout we got in any recent presidential election by a pretty large margin. So we do benefit from that. The kind of people who vote for Trump are usually the kind of people who are energized to vote anyway. Usually because they're old, their children don't talk to them, they're lonely, they don't have sex, they're lonely, and they're miserable. These are all correlative traits when we talk about people who might want to vote. And meanwhile, the left-leaning people or the young people are too busy doing skateboard tricks or having sex to go out there and vote. But we need to! Kamala has infinitely more energy than Biden or Clinton did at this point. That's the thing that I'm hoping for. Biden and Clinton were both varying levels of the resigned candidate we have to accept for electability reasons, because they were juxtaposed against Bernie. There was real energy for Bernie, and I still do think Bernie would have won both of those elections. Certainly he would have won the second if he had won the first, because of the, you know, momentum. In my humble opinion, just call me an optimist. But nobody liked Hillary Clinton, and Joe Biden did feel like the establishment pick that we all had to go along with. Kamala Harris slipping in at the last second here gives her an air of anti-establishment credibility, which is not real at all, but feels real. The fact that she got in at this last hurdle and she, like, there was a push against the donors and everyone was like frantically reorganizing the campaign, and that doesn't make her a populist candidate, but it does feel a lot more energetic. It's a lot more narratively satisfying. It's a little real. A lot of the DNC didn't want her. It's a little real. It's a little real. It's a little bit real. It's not reflective of populist political interests on her part. Again, we're not talking Bernie here, though Tim Walz is pretty cool. So does it really? Like, she's been VP. I don't think Americans would see her as anti-establishment. It's not her being anti-establishment. It's her not being the candidate everyone resigned themselves to, because that's how everyone felt about Joe Biden. I know not everyone, but a lot of people felt that way. That was the common idea. People voted for Joe Biden for electability purposes, aka they don't like him for any specific reason. They just think he's the guy who can win. You know, that doesn't speak to enthusiasm. There were people who were happy with Biden, but it wasn't as energetic, you know? It just wasn't as energetic. I mean, you can go back and look at the DNC back then. You know, the vibes were different. It's a lot more energy this time. A lot more energy. So, you know, we'll see. Walz is such a benefit to this campaign. Who was Clinton's VP pick? I don't know. I memory hold him. I wasn't doing content at that time, so I didn't commit it to memory. Didn't feel very important to me. Tim Kaine. That's right. Tim Kaine. So yeah, anyway, long story short, we need only young people to vote, okay? Only young people. This is how we win. What are the chances that Trump replaces Vance with Kennedy? 0. Are you commenting on the gender gap in voting? No, but men are terrible. So sub that position in, you know, like as a summary of what that discussion would be like. 538 says several simulations predicted Vance being replaced. There is literally no way to predict that. They're full of shit. I'm sorry. I'm not. I got an email from some fancy pants math boy who told me, like, hey, you gave it a bad rap. That was a joke. I'm being sarcastic. All right, it was a good joke. It was a good joke. But I'm already primed to not trust 538, so you're kind of setting me up here. Vosh bit the onion on that one. I'm willing to believe it. Pray for that day. Did you see 538 literally flip the prediction model from when Biden was the presumptive? Yeah, I saw that. I saw that. The previous model made Biden the favorite because it gave 4-to-1 weight to fundamentals over polls, a view that would make Trump stronger today and perhaps still ahead. Now it gives a 4-to-1 weight to polls over fundamentals. It's remember what I said about, like, the model you need to interpret the data? This is how quickly the model can flip, you know? It's, again, as I've said before, like, a lot of it really is just vibes. I wouldn't desperately adjusting the model to reflect to creating a model that would have predicted the results of previous elections. You know, you're just kind of like you're chasing your own tail. The most important part is trends. I agree with that. I do think polls taken about a week before the election have value. Yeah, but that's like saying you have a model to predict whether or not somebody's about to shoot you, and it's because you're facing the barrel of a gun, the finger just pulled in like that. You know, it's, I mean, it's at that point, it's like, why even bother? You can't even you can't even like adjust your campaign strategy that much that close to the election. You know, polling is correct when I like the results. I agree. Look up Alan Lichtman. He's the best election predictor. You people are in a cult. You know that, right? Every once in a while, somebody comes in chat. You're never bringing me around on the 13 models. Okay, you're not. It's not happening. You're not bringing me around on this. It fails the vibe check. That's all it takes for me. It's a vibe check. I know I'm wise enough to understand. It's all vibes. He fails the vibe check. Are you going to do more official predictions before Election Day? Official predictions? What, make myself look like a fool? Remember when that 13 Keys the White House grifter said Biden dropping out would be disastrous for the DNC? Did he say that? Was he one of the Biden dead enders? Is that true?
I've been studying American politics from the founding to the present, and I have never seen a political party engage in such a foolish, self-destructed escapade as the Democrats, trashing their incumbent president, the nominee not of members of Congress, but of the voters. And sadly, the media, the pollsters, the pundits, the operatives are all complicit in this.
Does nobody else get like a Jordan Peterson vibe from the way he talks and dresses? Like, there's almost an aesthetic to being a crank, and he nails it. Like the hair especially. I know it's like completely arbitrary, but stuff like this does matter.
In fact, they are pushing the Democrats into a situation where the White House party has never prevailed since 1900, an open seat with no incumbent running and a contested nomination. Whereas if Biden stays in and gets the nomination, you then have a situation of an incumbent running, an uncontested nomination. He got 87% of the primary vote, and almost always the White House party wins under those conditions.
When a person, okay, like this is an example of a person bending reality to fit the heuristic rather than building the heuristic to reflect reality, you know? The way he's like won the primary with 87%, there was no primary. Like you're following a broken, beat up road because your map told you to. Like it's clearly not leading you the right way, you know? I don't know. I don't know what heuristic means, like rule of thumb.
All of these critics, every one of them have in common is they have zero track record in predicting the outcomes of elections, and yet they all claim to know what the Democrats should do to be predicted winners this time. I do have a 40-year track record in my keys to the White House, and it takes 6 of them to go negative to count out the incumbent party. Biden ticks off incumbency and contest. That
stuff like this is it's crank horoscope shit, you know? Having pointers that you can refer to as a way of determining, you know, to keep an eye out for, that can be useful. But just flat out saying, oh, if you hit 7 of these, that means you're guaranteed to whatever. No. No. It'd be like, imagine if the Umberto Eco's 14 points of fascism was like, yeah, once you hit the 8th point, that's when it becomes fascist. No, it's just like things to look out for, you know? You're not ticking boxes here. Oh, I like boxes. Me too. I mean, we'll finish it, I guess. It's like 2 minutes long.
That means 6 of the remaining 11 would have to fall to predict the Democrats' defeat. He's not running. You have a party contest. Only 4 more keys would have to fall to predict their defeat. So not only are the Democrats running against the verdict of history, they are contradicting the only political system that's been right for 40 years. But there is one positive.
The only political system that's been right for 40 years. Jesus Christ.
Biden should stay in. He should become the nominee. And then I guarantee you all those spineless, cowardly Democrats who have turned against him will come running back and give us a big show of party unity.
Man, I sure hope that this didn't age well in the past 1 month, 1 month since he said this.
Plus, there's a lot yet to happen. We can't write off Biden right now. Remember, everyone wrote off Donald Trump after the Access Hollywood tape, and that was wrong. What if Biden succeeds in brokering a ceasefire and a hostage release in Gaza? That would totally change the tone of the entire conversation. Thank God we don't govern by polls. Or Donald Trump would have withdrew in 2016. Obama would have withdrawn after that disastrous debate with Mitt Romney when the polls turned against him. Harry Truman would have withdrawn because every poll and every pundit said he was losing. George H.W. Bush would have withdrawn when in June of the election.
Okay. He's got his own damn YouTube channel. Professor of Schools Cenk Uygur on elections. Oh, no. I have to see. I'm sorry.
You guys might have heard of this amazing professor who's predicted the last 9 out of 10 races, maybe even 10 out of 10. He's got 13 keys, Professor Alan Lichtman, and he knows that Biden's going to win. Well, he's entirely full of crap.
Cenk.
I welcome the effort of Cenk Uygur to engage with the keys and my analysis of the current political system. But his attack is based on a fundamentally flawed premise that we're 2 equally successful forecasters. That's wrong.
First of all, he says other people don't have any track record. Well, you're talking to the wrong dude, brother. So,
Wait, did they not actually debate? He's just responding to Cenk? Oh, no.
What have to go wrong?
Oh, I thought they were debating.
Criticism of Biden out.
They debated on breaking points? Oh, my God. Where?
I'm now going to discuss/debate the issue whether Joe Biden should stay in the race and he has any chance of winning or not with Professor Alan Lichtman. He's got 13 keys. Professor, if you're in the devastating.
Between my record of predicting elections and the record of Cenk and all the other critics of Joe Biden.
Okay, they do debate
35% chance of winning. So all these folks like Huffington Post had it at 98%. We're like, that is nonsense. Trump definitely has a chance of winning, despite the fact that it's election day and Hillary Clinton has what appears to be a large lead. So when you look at objective 30s, he almost always loses. But to be fair, what I was going to say is that I was saying always, but actually I looked it up so that it was more granular. I found the more granular polls throughout the entire year, And in 1968,
I'm getting
Lyndon
bored.
Johnson Nixon had fallen into the 30s, but Hubert Humphrey was in the 20s. And remember,
Nikki Haley and Nancy Pelosi? How could you possibly do that? He didn't know the name of his own doctor, who's been his physician for.
This is boring. And this is an hour long.
In 2016, it didn't matter. The incumbent's still the incumbent. Biden's death.
That's not Alan Lichtman. Though he has, I guess, hair of roughly equal quality, I suppose. Did he even make a video acknowledging Biden's dropout? Harris versus Trump. Is this the first video that he made where he acknowledged the dropout? Kamala excitement soaring, but does that mean she'll win? Okay, hold on.
Hello, friends.
Why do you look like
It
this?
is extraordinary how much difference a few weeks can make
Just very
in
intense
the
look.
mainstream media's coverage and assessment of this year's presidential election. It wasn't that long ago that the media story was all about President Joe Biden's faltering performance in the first presidential debate. The story focused on his age at 81 and his alleged diminishment of his mental capacities to effectively run for office and perhaps even to effectively govern in the few months remaining on his term. The story was that there was no chance that Joe Biden could actually beat
He does
Donald
look
Trump
like a Romulan.
in the election, and that his campaign was sinking like a rock. But to understand how the American touting Vice President Harris as overwhelmingly likely to be the next president of the United States, or at least having a substantial edge now and having the momentum as compared to Donald Trump, who seems to be faltering. The problem with this PAC journalism is it misses all the nuances of a presidential campaign and fails to comprehend how presidential elections really work, and instead, like the herd of antelope, goes in one direction and another with the changing winds that they detect. The media was fundamentally wrong.
Is distinguished professor a title? His starting label called himself one? No, distinguished professor is not an actual title. He's just calling himself that.
Pronouncing the Biden campaign finished, in pronouncing virtually an inevitable Trump victory. By no means was that the case. When you look at the fundamentals of a presidential election based upon the keys to the White House, my prediction system that's been right since 1984, you get a very different picture. I'm certainly not saying that Biden would necessarily have won the election, but he had some very significant advantages on the fundamentals. He was the sitting president. He was selected virtually by acclamation, not by Jamie Raskin or Adam Schiff or any other members of Congress or political operatives like James Carville, but by the voters themselves. And
it can be. I've never heard of anyone refer to themselves as distinguished professor in like a formal sense. I've only ever heard of a person call another person distinguished professor as a compliment. But I'll admit, I didn't know that it was like a referred title. It's weird to call yourself that. It is weird to call yourself
the Democratic Party may well have contributed to a self-fulfilling prophecy of defeat by having so many prominent leaders openly, right out in public, trash their incumbent president and the choice of the Democratic primary voters. We've never seen that before. But as I said, Biden brings incumbency, turns that key in favor of the Democrats, turns the contest key in favor of the Democrats. Typically, when the party holding the White House has won both of those keys, barring some other very negative developments, it has prevailed in the November election, something that the mainstream media has ignored. Now the mainstream media has gone to the other extreme and made a similar, if opposite, mistake, presuming that Kamala Harris, because of all the factors I mentioned, and particularly her upsurge in the polls, is necessarily, or at least has a big edge on winning the presidential election. But that kind of poll-driven, pundit-driven analysis, it's like sports talk radio. If you want to actually analyze the campaign and not follow her journalism, you need to look to the keys to the White House.
Wow, what a coincidence. If you want to actually follow what's going on from the person who just like got a prediction massively incorrect, rather than following like all the ongoing polling data that's used both by pollsters, pundits, campaigns, everything, instead it's my perfect system that I can constantly reevaluate and reinterpret as necessary to arrive at the correct conclusion. In retrospect, Biden has dropped out. What now? Lichtman Live 59.
10, 9. Resign and make Kamala the POTUS. Do they hold on to the incumbency key?
I don't answer hypotheticals like that. That would be a very difficult
What?
call.
Professor Lichtman, if Biden decides, say, a week before his term over, if Biden decides, say, a week before his term is over, to resign and make Kamala the POTUS, do they hold on to the incumbency key?
I don't answer hypotheticals like that. That would be a very difficult call, and I'm not gonna.
No, it wouldn't be. This guy's such a crank, dude. The obvious answer is no. None of the electoral benefits that you would enjoy from being an incumbent president would be enjoyed by a person for sitting in the office for the last week of the previous termed presidency. That's ridiculous. The obvious answer is no. But he just has his heuristics, you know? So he can't even like engage in the logic of them because there is no logic to them. It's just stuff that he concluded post hoc to fit the mold of previous presidential elections.
Answer it as a hypothetical.
What if it's one day? What if the day before the convention he's like, you know what, Kamala, or a day before the election he's like, Kamala's the president. Is that the incumbency key?
Well, probably not, because probably a third of the American people or more have already voted by mail and in early voting.
Fair point. Shannon Starr says, how much convention controversy unturns the contest key?
The winner has to garner at least 2/3 or more and be nominated on the first ballot.
It's such crank shit. Whatever. A third of Americans already voted prior to the convention. I think he heard day of election, not convention. I think he just misheard there. I don't know. He lies about the 2016 presidential elections. But yeah, I've seen this. People say like he's lied about his model working for previous elections. I've seen it.